There are things that have stood the test of time because they are good and work, and there are things that are hip at this moment which will not stand the test of time, and I can see that they won't.
Welcome to You Are a Storyteller with Brian McDonald and Jesse Bryan. This program is produced in Seattle, Washington by Belief Agency. On this week's episode, we talk about some of Brian's favorite movies and what you can learn from them.
So, the listeners won't know this, but we haven't done an episode in a long time.
No, we haven't.
You've been traveling like crazy. I mean, you've been doing the mentorship stuff with Visco. You've been speaking. Like, it's fun to get back in the room and do another episode. It's been too long.
It has.
I think that this episode is really trying to remind the audience that there's stuff we like. Specifically that there's stuff you like, because you get a lot. You get it a lot, right?
People think I don't like anything.
Yeah. So we're trying to debunk that on today's episode, and we're going to talk about movies and shows.
But I have to say this.
Yeah.
Here's a question. I never want to hear this question again. Where's the camera? I never want to hear this again. What have you liked lately? I don't like the lately part of that question.
Why?
I don't understand it. Like, I don't understand it. Well, you have to like something that they made yesterday. Why? Well, I don't understand. Like, So we're not going to talk about stuff that's current, probably. When you ask me these questions, it probably won't be a current thing. I'm only interested in the quality of a thing. I don't care if it was made 100 years ago or yesterday.
Yeah.
It's just that I don't
feel like if we were talking about the pyramids and go, no, but which one of the seven wonders, that you like lately? It's like, well, there hasn't been any seven wonders lately. Right?
Yeah. To me, it's there are things that have stood the test of time because they are good and work, and there are things that are hip at this moment which will not stand the test of time, and I can see that they won't. I can't say what they are because that's a whole thing. Yeah. But and so I just felt like I needed to say that because people are gonna wonder that. Underneath it'll the comments will say, how come you didn't talk about this, or why don't you
whatever the hip thing is.
Whatever the hip cool thing is. And I just don't see it as a relevant question.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just don't. What do I like and why I like it? Sure. What did you like that came out last year? Why do I have to like something that came out last year? If there was nothing good that came out last, I'm not even saying that that's true. I'm just saying, why is that relevant?
Yeah. I have a feeling that you're right.
Yeah.
That'll come up, so it's good that you diffuse that right at the beginning of the show, because you're right. As I look at this list, there's not a whole bunch of things that have come out in, really the last, 15 years-ish? Oh, there's one on here. Yeah. So that's good. Yeah. There's one of them. But really, the point of this is to say, here's some really good stuff you can watch. Like, I know you've had folks reach out before. Like, our friend Ed reached out. He's like, what should I be watching? How do I start to, kind of see this? It's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing is where it gets really powerful is when you can watch it and go like, oh, I can see that now, right? It's like if you've never built a house before and you open up one of the walls in your house and you go like, oh, there's studs back here. I can start to understand how the house is built.
Right.
So the goal of today is to give you some really good things to watch, almost as homework, and then let you know specifically what to be watching for when you sit down to watch these. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's start with, really, it seems like a movie that was kind of a catalyst for you. It was a huge deal in your life. Let's talk about Planet of the Apes.
All right.
Okay. How did you discover Planet of the Apes?
So I was too young when that first one came out, 1968. So in 1968, I'm 3, right? Yeah. But it was one of the first movies, I would say that, along with maybe Butch Cassidy, that I heard about when I was really and a little later, Godfather. When I was really young, people were talking about those things. So Planet of the Apes was sort of always present.
Your dad liked it too, right?
My dad loved Planet of the Apes. Yeah.
Your dad had the coolest name of names ever.
Rock?
Right? Rock.
Rock.
What a cool name.
Yeah. So yeah, my dad, he dug that movie a lot, and I remember him talking to us about it, like us kids, my brother and sister and me, and talking about how amazing he thought the movie was, and he was obsessed with the fact that they smoke cigars for some reason. Like they apes, they smoke cigars. I don't know why that was the thing that put it over the top for him, but it was. And we could watch, from our porch. There was a drive-in movie theater, so we'd watch movies, and I remember one of the Apes movies, I think it was probably the third movie. I think that's the first one I saw. So we'd watch it from the porch, but one day we actually went to the drive-in, and I saw that one. And I remember being blown away by sort of some of the visual stuff really impacted me when I was a kid. I must have been 5 or 6, I guess, when that one came out. I think I forget what it's called, but it's one where the apes come to modern day Earth. And I remember they took off their space helmets and they were like apes. And I remember that, like, oh my God. I remember that was the coolest thing I ever saw. But later, I think on TV, I saw the first movie.
Did it hit you when you saw it?
Yeah, I was obsessed with it. I was obsessed with that movie for a long time.
Why? What was it?
I don't think I knew why at the time. I just loved it. It was, most guys my age, they became filmmakers or wanted to become filmmakers when they saw either Star Wars or some people as late as Raiders, but that was pretty late for me. Star Wars, came out when I was 12, and I was already way into film by the time Star Wars came out. So, Planet of the Apes was really that movie that got me very interested in making movies and figuring out how it all worked. I think part of it was the makeup and all of that, but later as I studied it, the story is what really got me. Stories were, for me, a real driver in me learning how to do this. Like this, for whatever reason, I focused on stories. Some people will focus on cinematography or whatever, and for whatever reason, the stories were everything to me, even when I was young, and I didn't recognize it for a while, but that was always the driver. And that one had the best story, and that's the one I liked the most. They all had apes in them, and they were all talking and smoking cigars or whatever, but that one stuck with me. And later I found out it was Rod Serling who wrote it.
So that's how you discovered Rod Serling, too?
It's how I discovered Rod Serling, but I didn't know Rod Serling. I didn't associate him with that movie for quite a while. Like, it was later that I went.
And Rod Serling also did
The Twilight Zone. So I was a fan of Rod Serling from The Twilight Zone, and then realized, wait, that's the same guy. Mm-hmm. At least he co-wrote Planet of the Apes with a guy named
There's a huge picture of him in your office.
There's a big picture.
Right.
There's a big
So it stuck
picture.
with you.
Yeah.
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 It's a great place to start.
Yeah.
I mean, boy. So when somebody goes home or whatever, they cue it up. Mm-hmm. What do you watch? Like, again, we're trying to give you things that you can, like, almost like handles as you watch the film. Mm-hmm. What should they watch for? Like, there's that opening monologue, right? Like, I don't know. Like, what should you be looking at? Well,
one of the things that made Rod Serling so good is his use of theme. Like, he understood how to use theme, what I call armature and invisible ink, but you call it what you want to. But his stories always had a point, and there was no fat on his work. So there was nothing in there that didn't have to do with his armature or his theme. And I think that's the reason it works and stands the test of time, and they keep doing remakes and they keep doing reboots and they keep because there's something at the core of that story that is resonating with people. So yes, there's an opening monologue with the astronauts. One of the astronauts, played by Charlton Heston, this astronaut Taylor, and he's sort of making a recorded journal, and he. I think he's actually smoking a cigar in space on a spaceship. Yeah. But he's asking himself, because they've been gone from the Earth for a while.
I also love that he smoked a cigar in space.
Yeah.
That's such a bad idea. Like, they're just like, hold on a second. Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah. But, this is before people actually went to the moon, right? This is the year before. So, and he probably wrote it, a couple of years before that.
Yeah, it's fine to have an open flame inside of it.
Yeah, they didn't know. I don't know. So, anyway. He's giving this, he's making this recording. And one of the things he says there is we've been gone from Earth a long time. And I don't know what kind of Earth we'll return to. But he goes, he wonders, he uses the term man, but he means humanity or whatever, but he uses the term man. And he says, is man still the same as they were when we left? Do they still make war against each other? Do they still keep their neighbors' children starving? Do they?
It's crazy.
Yeah, but it's like, I wonder if human beings are still like that. And then he says this really interesting thing is, who are listening to me now are a different breed, hopefully a better one, he says, right? Then they crash and all of that, and they end up looking for water. They're on this planet. They don't know where they are, right? So they're looking for water and or something so they can, live. And they're walking, and there's a whole conversation about how these three astronauts talking to Taylor, and they say, one of them says, well, you hated Earth. You hated people. You didn't like people. Why did you, why? What is it? I can't remember exactly what he says. Basically, he says, you hated people. Why did you come out here to space? What was your thing? And he goes, well, I believe there has to be something out in the universe that's better than man. There has to be, right? So later he's captured by the apes. You'll see Dr. Zaius, sort of the antagonist of the piece. If you watch it, Dr. Zaius always knows who Taylor is. If you watch it with that in mind, it's amazing, but he always knows. Oh no, because the other apes think, well, he they think he's a mutant, all these other things, but Zaius knows, no, this guy's dangerous. Men are dangerous. Human beings are dangerous. And that's his motivation for doing all the things he does, which are really bad. So, but what's interesting is Taylor ends up on the other side of this argument, right? So he hates humanity, but then he gets to a place where the apes hate humanity, and then he finds himself defending humanity, right?
Yeah.
But also proving their point.
On trial.
Yeah. Also proving their point by being the way he is.
Yeah.
So when you get to the end of that piece, you'll see that the thesis is proven out. Like, are human beings still self-destructive? And so when you get to the end of that piece, you'll see that that's either true or not true, right? According to this piece.
Yeah.
And so the whole piece is about the self-destructive nature of human beings. And sort of the voice of that throughout the piece is Dr. Zaius. He talks about that a lot. And it's... at the time, we were worried about nuclear war. The Cold War was raging, and everybody was worried about the Soviets and us and, and bombs and blowing up the Earth. But what's interesting is that idea that we're self-destructive is still relevant now for climate change and all these other issues that we're facing. It's still relevant. It still makes its point, even though we're not as worried about nuclear weapons as we once were.
So... you're saying there's a straight line in this film. If you watch this line, watch Dr. Zaius and watch Charlton Heston's character, and it will make sense. Yeah.
Well, at one point, Charlton.
What does it prove?
What does it prove? What does the story prove? I've said it before, but people don't understand what a theme is. They misunderstand it, so they come up with a bunch of ideas and they think, "How do I put a theme in this?" But that's not the way theme works. Theme is a manifestation. Or the story is a manifestation of the theme. That's what the story is. So you're proving something. And the story exists to help prove that. That's why the story exists.
Yeah.
Right? Now, you can come up with characters or something first because that's what sparks you, but you better very quickly get to some real reason.
Why this character? Why now?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's one of my biggest concerns, actually, with stuff now is I ask myself, why is this character in this story? And there's often no reason for it. There's, why is Taylor in this story? Well, Taylor is a person who hates humanity because they're self-destructive. That's why Taylor's in this story.
He has to be in it.
Yeah.
Because if he loved humanity and was always talking about how great it was, the film wouldn't work.
Right. Well, Bill Murray in Groundhog Day, right? Doesn't want to go do this report again and says in the first act, somebody's going to see me doing this and think I don't have a future. Right. Right.
So good.
Right. Yeah. And he's a jerk, so there's a reason he's going through this, right? Why is this character in this story? I'm always asking myself that, and often there's no actual answer. It's a quirky character doing quirky things or whatever. Why? Well, I don't know. Just because it's funny or entertaining or whatever.
Right.
Okay.
Planet of the Apes is not like that.
Planet of the Apes is not like that.
Everything's intentional.
Yeah, and it resonates to this day, and they still keep trying to remake it and reboot it and everything, I think, because that piece was so strong.
But the funny thing is now it feels more like they think the reason why it worked was because there was talking apes.
Right. In fact, though, I will say this about the newer movies. The things that do work in them go back to this theme on some level. So the pieces of those things that do work, the most powerful things are the things that go back to this theme.
Which makes sense. That's why you needed the apes were where the people were and the people were where the apes are. Like they switch positions. When you see the film, it'll make sense. But so watch for that.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go back a little bit further. Double Indemnity.
Okay.
How'd you discover Double Indemnity? Do you remember?
Well, I used to watch a lot of old movies. It's just because I couldn't sleep I can't sleep now, but I couldn't sleep in high school, and movies came out late at night, and I would just watch them.
It's true. And I can't tell you how many emails I get it. And I go 3:30 in the morning. Instead of emails at 3:30 in the morning.
I'm awake.
Yeah.
And so I saw a lot of old movies that way, especially before there was a way to see. You know what I mean? There was no streaming. There was no cable. There was no.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Wasn't even the sun in the sky.
There was no. It was pre-sun. Yeah.
It was a while ago.
Yeah, a long time ago. Yeah, and so so I would watch old movies and stuff. I don't know if that's the first time I saw it or not, but there's a point at which I became interested in Billy Wilder as a director and as a writer, and so looked for his stuff specifically and studied his stuff specifically. I mean, I did that with Hitchcock, and I did that with
but Billy, he could do anything.
Billy Wilder was
he could do anything, because like if you were to watch Some Like It Hot and Double Indemnity, nobody else can do that. Who else can do that?
Yeah, and The Apartment.
All the different types. He could make anything. That guy was crazy.
Yeah,
but Double Indemnity. What was it about Double Indemnity that really grabbed you?
Double Indemnity is.
You want to set it up just in general, what is it about?
Yeah, Double Indemnity is about an insurance salesman who, door-to-door insurance salesman. This is made in the 40s. And it was made in the 40s, but I think it takes place in the 30s. But it was made in the 40s. It's kind of hard to tell because it's an old movie about an old, not that far, that much distance between when it was made and what it's about. But I think it was made about the 30s, taking place, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Anyway, this door-to-door insurance salesman meets a woman and eventually ends up having an affair with her, and she decides it would be a good idea to kill her husband and collect the insurance money. And so he gets involved in that.
Gosh, there's some stuff in that movie, man.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know honeysuckle could smell like death or whatever. Right? Like there's some stuff in that.
Well,
movie.
that's a good example. That's actually, I think, what the piece ends up being about ultimately is that that he was essentially seduced into this thing, right? That he has that line, about honeysuckle sometimes, or death sometimes smells like honeysuckle.
Yeah.
That
He's driving away from her house.
Yeah, that death or that something dangerous can look appealing on the outside. And I think that's really what the piece is getting at. Like, be careful.
It's straight up survival.
Yeah, be careful.
What should you watch for? If you haven't seen it before, again, the point of this is not just to sit down and kick your feet up. The point of this is to learn. Mm-hmm. So if you're sitting down, if you were talking to a student, you go like, you need to watch this watch for these things.
Right.
It will make you appreciate it more.
I would say watch. There are a lot of things to watch in Double Indemnity, but one of the things to watch for is it has a strong first act. Billy Wilder always had a strong first act. So I would look at that first act and see everything that's established in that first act, because one of the things you find out is that there's an insurance fraud investigator who works in the office, and you get to see that guy work, and you know how good that guy is at his job. So what that does is it tells you, and also you see the friendship between the insurance salesman and this guy, right?
Unbelievable performances too.
Yeah, really good performances. Edward G. Robinson.
It's unbelievable. He kills it.
He's amazing in it, and he was a big star in the 30s.
You'll recognize his face, probably.
Some people don't. It's weird, but they don't. They don't watch enough old movies. They don't know him. But he's the guy that everybody imitates when they say, "Yeah, see, yeah."
But he was always a tough guy, and that's what was cool about this role.
Yeah, he was a tough guy in the 30s, gangster, and then he. I think he didn't want to do Double Indemnity because it wasn't a big enough part. But he was convinced. He was talked into doing it. And it was perfect for him. I mean, he still worked. He worked until he died, I think, pretty much. Like, he kept working. But he's really good, and you see their friendship, and their friendship becomes part of the story. And it's established right at the beginning how close they are. I would say look for that. Look how just everything is established before the decision to commit the murder.
Yeah. You know what that first act too, that it reminds me of something you were saying that we were talking about a newer movie, and how what bummed you out was they would stop the movie for the jokes.
Right.
So the movie would be moving, and then there'd be jokes, which would just stop the momentum of a movie, and then the scene would start again. And what's crazy about the first act of Double Indemnity is it never stops for your plot points.
Right.
Right. Like it's not. It just feels like you're going.
Right.
It's not just like, stop. This is important. It's all woven together. I mean, Billy Wilder, obviously, but...
Right. But, I mean, yeah, he was a funny guy and a clever guy, and all of that's in there. But yeah, the movie doesn't stop so he can be funny.
Yeah.
Right? This movie we were talking about, like, there's a whole long scene where it just stops so it can be funny.
Yeah.
And then the movie picks... It's weird. It's a hiccup.
Right.
Right. Because
I mean, even stopping for plot points.
Right.
Like where you can feel like the movie's moving, stop. Oh, this is important. This is where they tell us, how the mom. None of that. It just moves.
It does. Yeah, it's smooth.
Yeah.
It's really smooth. It's just one of the best movies anybody's. In fact, Hitchcock liked it, and he wrote afterwards that after Double Indemnity, the two most important words in Hollywood are Billy Wilder.
Really? Hitchcock said that?
Hitchcock said that. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
High praise. Wasn't it first noir?
It's the first movie that has all the elements that people think of as film noir. The shadows and the femme fatale and all the elements.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so because the first act is so strong, that's what leads to a strong third act also.
Right.
Right? And so when you start to see them paired together, you start to go, wow.
Yeah. Really that's the thing that most people overlook is how much heavy lifting that first act has to do, because it sets up everything. It makes everything else possible. It's the rules of the game, right? These are the rules we're going to play within. These are the parameters we're going to be working within. Yeah. Right? So it sets up all the things that can happen, what kind of reality this is. There's insurance fraud, and this guy's the Sherlock Holmes of insurance fraud. And this guy, right? Everything's all set up, right? And once you do that, you can't add new pieces, right? Yeah. These are the pieces you're going to be playing with.
Yep.
Watch how well he does that. Billy Wilder's a genius at that.
He's so focused, it's crazy.
Yeah, he never lost focus. His work is all of his work is amazing that way.
I also think it's interesting. I've heard you talk about this before, and I don't really. Because this isn't about just watching it; it's about studying. Mm-hmm. You want to talk about why the murder had to happen as the fulcrum?
Sure. So
I'm just saying for somebody to watch.
Right.
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 It was an interesting choice.
Sure. Well, here's what happens. So you go through the first act, and the first act is all that setup. He meets this woman, they hit it off, they start having an affair, all that stuff. When the first comes up, hey, let's kill my husband, he's like, no, I don't think that's a good idea, right? But then he gets further into the relationship, and he starts thinking about it, and he starts thinking, well, I know a lot about insurance and insurance fraud. I bet I could pull this off. So he agrees to it. So the first half of Act 2 is all the things they need to do to make the murder happen, right? So they plan it. Okay, we can do this, we can do that. Then they find out that you get more money if he's killed in an unusual way, like on a train, right? So you get double the money, double indemnity, right? So they go, okay, we got to get him on a train. They have all these elaborate things they have to do. Well, you can't sustain a story with planning a murder, right? So at the midpoint, at the fulcrum of that piece, the murder happens, because that's where it has to happen. It makes the most sense, right? And so you're still dealing with, let's kill my husband, right? Let's do that. You're still dealing with that story-wise, but now you're dealing with the outcome, right? Right.
Yeah. Can we get away with it?
Right. Yeah. Then it becomes, can we get away with it? And it's often called the point of no return, right? This fulcrum, or it has been called that. It used to be in the old days, the point of no return, which is a good way to think about the fulcrum, because now there's no going back. If you plan the murder but don't do it, well, okay, right? But once you do it, there is no going back. It's the point of no return. In Planet of the Apes, the fulcrum is when they find out that Taylor can actually talk. The apes find out he can talk. It happens right at the fulcrum. Right, used to have the script. I look at it. It's like page 60. Boom. He's like he talks.
It's not an accident.
No. It changes the nature of the conflict. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you end up with something boring.
Because none of the other humans
can talk.
That are on the planet at that point, who live out and forage and all that, they can't talk.
Yeah, they're like wild animals.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's weird and unusual that he can talk, and so it's revealed that he can talk at the fulcrum. So at the fulcrum of double indemnity, it's the husband is killed. Now they got to deal with trusting each other and evading the cops and evading the insurance company and all of that stuff.
But what I love about that too is they actually pay it off. I hate going to movies where they set that up and then, at the end it's like, oh, they didn't end up or there's a twist or whatever. It's like, what's great is they actually they set it up, they pay it off.
Yeah.
And it actually ratchets up the stakes.
It does.
Right? And then, of course, the third act is killer because of the first act and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But anything to look for in the third act?
Yeah, I would. He does an interesting job of. He does this in Ace in the Hole too. Here's a guy who's he's murdered someone, so he can't be redeemed fully.
Yeah,
but he is somewhat redeemed.
Yeah,
by the end, he does do something good. In the end, which is interesting.
It is interesting.
He's not fully redeemed. It's not like.
Yeah, he gets away.
Yeah, but he does go out trying to do something good.
I think that's really interesting that Billy does that.
Yeah,
I think that's cool. I think we're missing that.
I think we are too.
Right? It's like everything is so fate. Like, give us something.
Right.
Like Ace in the Hole is a great example, but of that he has a chance.
Yeah.
The bad thing happened. That's true, but also let's see what he can do.
Yeah.
Right. Great. The ending of that movie is awesome. So Double Indemnity, I think the thing that if most people for the first time they see it, they'll probably notice is the language.
Mm-hmm.
Man, for the dialogue geeks out there, there's some talk about writing.
Yeah.
Right? It's all motivated is the difference.
Yeah.
The cool thing about the dialogue in this movie is it's always pushing forward the story.
Yeah.
You could see other filmmakers trying to write stuff like that for the sake of writing like that.
That's what they do, yeah.
Yeah.
Also, what people don't understand, and it's also I have to say, give credit to Raymond Chandler, who was co-writer on that script, and Raymond Chandler sort of, in his novels, is famous for that kind of banter.
Man, it's crazy.
So Billy Wilder's good at it already, then Raymond Chandler on top of it, so that has a lot to do with how why that works the way it does.
You'll see what I mean. When you hear the honeysuckle line when he's driving away from her house, you're like, wow, that whole section is insane. Well, I mean, the whole movie's great.
But here's the other thing that people don't realize when they try to imitate these things. They don't ask themselves why people did things. They just imitate the surface of it. But you're talking about censorship and people not being able to do and say certain things on the screen. So the writers then had to write around things. So people spoke, right, around things. Yeah. So that the subtext was really what's happening in the scene. So people will act like they're talking about one thing when they're talking about something else.
Yeah.
Right? Something they can't talk about. Right?
Yeah.
So we can't openly talk about sex. We'll talk about it underneath here or whatever it is.
Man, it makes the scene so much better.
Yeah.
Like, I know we're not talking about movies, but I just watched a movie and I was like, oh my God. Everything was just explaining exactly what was happening.
Yeah.
And you're just like, man alive. It's just awful.
Yeah. I say that a lot when I see things and people don't know what I mean. I'm like, well, everybody in the movie said exactly what they meant. And they don't know what I mean.
Yeah, right.
But it's amazing what happens when that's not the case. When people are talking underneath, which is the way it works.
This movie literally had this scene where it's like, you killed my father. You're going to pay for that. I'm not going to pay for that. You're going to pay. And you're just going like... Oh my God! Come on.
Yeah.
But when you talk about those kind of restrictions they had, wow, it led to some really interesting work.
Yeah, it did.
It made things better.
Yeah,
actually.
It did. So a lot of the comedies in the 30s did the same thing. The screwball comedies, they had this kind of banter, but a lot of that banter comes out of the fact that they couldn't say things, and it would be less good if they could say them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, really amazing film. Totally worth your time. Again, one of those you sit down with a notepad and just take notes, right? Like, maybe we should have set that up. You want to talk about like I remember it was a long time ago. You said, "Well, I don't watch movies; I study them," or something like that. Can you talk about that philosophy, especially as we talk about the rest of these films?
Well, I don't remember what I said. I can tell you, I was never a passive viewer. Like I just never was when I was a kid. Maybe when I was a little kid, but it was pretty quick that I was like, how does this work? How does this, I mean, it was early for me that I started to try to figure out how things worked and why this would happen and not this. And, and so it's an old pathway in my brain.
Yeah.
And so it's not effort. It's not an effort for me to sit down and study a movie. It's automatic. For other people, it seems to be an effort. They get sucked into the story and they forget to study and, like, oh, I was supposed to be taking notes.
Right.
I can do both those things at the same time. I guess it's probably like being a musician, right? You can listen to music at the same time you go, that was a wrong note, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's more like that. I would imagine. I don't play an instrument, but I would imagine it's like that. So I try to be very conscious about the puppeteer. You know what I mean? What's the puppeteer doing here? To make me believe this thing.
Yeah.
To make me believe that this character exists. To make me believe that this situation is real. To make me care about what happens to these people. What are they doing to make me care? Or to make me interested or whatever. And often what happens is people look at the end result. So in Invisible Ink, I think I talk about it, or in one of my blogs I talk about it, blog post. But people often focus on the thing that they respond to. So they'll say that part of this thing was really good, right? Because they're focusing on the what they responded to. But what they don't understand is that thing you think is really good is good because of everything that came before it, right? It's the punchline of a joke, right? The punchline. The joke is not the punchline.
Yeah.
Right? The joke is everything that's contributed to you understanding that punchline. And so the same thing happens when something dramatic or interesting happens in a film or a story, is that you've established, you've laid down all the tracks so that you can hit that target, if that makes sense.
People that don't believe in structure must hate jokes.
Right.
Because it's the easiest way. I think you've talked about this before. Talk about the easiest way to see structure
jokes are the easiest way to see structure, because you'll notice when you tell a joke or somebody tells a joke that every piece of the joke.
And when somebody does it out of order, you go, oh, well, hold on, let me start over.
Yeah, they understand that, you won't understand it unless I tell you, right?
Yeah.
The penguin has a boombox or
Yeah.
whatever, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
If you didn't know he had a boombox, the rest of the joke's not going to make any sense.
So this penguin has a boombox.
Right.
Yeah.
You're just talking about a penguin walking into a bar. Halfway through, you go, oh, hold on a second. Did I tell you about... Oh, let me start over. So the penguin with a boombox, it's already over. It's ruined.
Yeah.
It's the same rules.
It's exactly
the same rules.
Yeah. I don't know why it's so hard to understand.
I get it for jokes, but it doesn't make sense for films. You go like, well, that's a crazy thing to say.
Yeah.
Because we know it works. Listen to somebody tell a joke.
Yeah.
Proposal, argument, conclusion.
People always know that it's so weird. People do understand it in a joke, and they know when you forgot to tell the part where the...
Yeah, you got to say the thing about the...
Yeah, but when it's a movie or long form, and I go, they didn't set that up. Well, I thought, no, they didn't tell me the goat was wearing a party hat. That was part of the deal.
Yeah.
You know?
How else was it supposed to know it's his birthday?
Yeah.
Sure. Simple.
I like this joke we're making up.
Exactly right. Penguins and goats. But that's just a really great thing to do. I was saying the thing about the notes is not being too proud to sit down with a pad and pen.
Right.
And go like, hey, I'm trying to learn this stuff. Also, you might want to watch it alone, right?
Yeah.
I can't tell you how much friction has happened in my house because I'm trying to watch a movie and then people are like talking, or they'll walk out, and specifically Kate, to ask her. So walk in and be like, so what I miss? And I'm like... if you don't want to watch it, let's just not watch it. No, I do want to watch it. I just also want to be on my phone and blah, blah. It's like, no, because you're going to ask me about it. And I'm not going to, I don't want to explain. Like, it's like I'm trying to learn something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like we're watching it in a different way.
Yeah.
I'm watching it going, I have to understand this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to miss any. I want to, right?
Yeah.
I said the passive thing. So when we talk about these films, if you really want to understand because what we're trying to do is crawl inside of Billy Wilder's head. Right? Or whoever, or Spielberg's head, or any of these folks we're talking about. You're trying to really figure out how did they solve problems? How did they think?
Yeah.
That's all you're trying to do.
Yeah.
They put their fingerprints all over it. They show you how to do it.
Right.
You just got to watch for it, right? And if you really want to learn the movie, then you watch it again with the sound off.
Yeah.
And then you can learn the visual storytelling side.
Yeah.
Right? But I mean that idea of like actually sitting down just like you were trying to learn anything else. Pad and paper, whatever. No distractions, not an iPad, so you get alerts, but just sit down and go like, okay, first act.
Yeah.
What is he teaching? What is he telling me in what order? And you can even just map out the scenes and you'll start to go, oh.
Right. And also just taking notice of what, where you get engaged. Like, that was really great. And try to figure out why you respond to that. Because, there's something there. Again, if you just laugh at the joke and don't understand that everything that came before is the joke, then you just think, that line is funny. It's like, is that line funny, or is that line funny in context? Right? Or whatever. Is this scene interesting, or is this scene interesting in context?
That's right.
Right? So understanding the context is really important, and most people I talk to don't have a sense of the context.
Well, if you walked into the scene where E.T. dies and you see the rest of it and everybody's crying, you're like, what's wrong with you guys?
Right.
So weird Muppet just died or whatever.
Right.
And you're like, don't say that about it. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, but that's your thing. It's all working together in concert to make this happen. It's kind of like Hitchcock used to talk about that stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's all,
intentional.
Yeah. Well, the bigger boat line in Jaws, right? Where he's like, we're going to need a bigger boat. Right. Well, people think of that line as so funny and such a great line.
Yeah.
But this is a guy who doesn't want to be out there. He's afraid of the water. He doesn't want to be out there. Mm-hmm. And so the context, everything that tells you, like, he doesn't want to be in the water. He doesn't want to be with this shark. He doesn't want to be with this crazy captain. Like, none of these things does he want. He's out of his element in this, there's a shark expert and a shark hunter, and he's completely out of his element. And so when he says that line, it's very human. Mm-hmm. It's something we all understand. Like, get a bigger boat. I get it. Right? But it's also everything that set it up that makes it work.
Yep.
It doesn't work all by itself.
The story about the Indianapolis.
Right.
The reason it works is because, man, talk about a great way to set up the consequences.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
It's really good.
By itself, it's clever writing, but, man, in context, it's dynamite. I mean...
Yeah. Context matters, and people often forget that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, didn't you like this part? Didn't you like that? I hear that a lot. Didn't you like that part, though? Didn't you like this part? It's like, I don't think of it as parts.
Yeah.
You
Just
know?
all I know is out of nowhere, there's a bar, and there's a penguin with a boombox, and I have no idea what he's doing there.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, but it was clever. And you're like, well, sure, I'm not saying it wasn't clever. It just... It doesn't make for a good movie, though.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Difference between that part and the story.
Yeah.
Right?
And I don't...
Didn't you like how the turtle won? Well, yeah, but you got to understand that he was racing a rabbit. Right. That's why it matters that when he wins,
Yeah. Yeah.
Makes sense?
Yeah, but people will say that to me often. But don't you think it had some good parts? You know, if your car doesn't run, but it has some good parts...
Yeah, sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it looks good. You're like, yeah, sitting there on the side of the road. I got to get to work.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny. I had food poisoning last night.
Mm-hmm.
I told you I think Katie was trying to kill me. And you're like, yeah, but wasn't the spaghetti good? It's like, yeah, it tasted good the first time I ate it, but coming back, it didn't taste it. Like, how was dinner? Not good. It wasn't good.
Yeah.
Right? It just, the whole thing didn't work together as a whole.
Right.
It was a bad experience. It started good, but the third act fell apart. Yeah. All right. So, I mean, that's what we're trying to do, right? Mm-hmm. Since we're talking about Billy, let's talk about the apartment.
Okay.
Didn't have to twist your arm?
No. Well, the apartment, for my money, Billy Wilder made a lot of masterpieces. And for my money, the apartment is the masterpiece of the masterpieces. That movie's incredible.
See, people think you don't like movies.
Yeah, that's not true.
You like The Apartment?
I love The Apartment. Yeah, it's a special movie.
Yeah.
It all works. I don't know how to... It all works together.
What works? Give me one thing that works. Me to watch for. So for somebody to watch for.
Right. Well, watch for the clones. So watch how the main character, Jack Lemmon's character, watch for...
my favorite actor.
Yeah. Well,
God.
Yeah, he's really good.
If we could clone him.
Yeah.
He's untouchable, man.
Yeah, he's very good. He's very good. He's really great in The Odd Couple.
God, anything. Like, he could do serious...
He did a lot of it. Yeah. But anyway, so that character, C.C. Baxter is the character's name. and C.C. Baxter, you'll see how he doesn't think very much of himself. You might not think that, like that's what the problem is, but he wants to move up in his company, and he wants to, I think, not be part of the crowd, which is interesting because there's in fact a scene or some shots of him in a crowd from the movie The Crowd. It's kind of a ripped off shot from a silent movie called The Crowd, and when people didn't have cubicles, but they sat in these big offices with just desks. And so
you've probably seen the shot before.
Yeah, you probably have seen the shot. And so, but there's a silent movie, The Crowd, where this,
really?
Yeah, oh yeah. So because good artists steal, right?
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Well, and he sets up at the beginning the population of New York.
Yeah.
And, right?
So he's trying to stand out,
yeah.
Right? So the way he's doing that is he's lending his apartment out to these executives, people above him, so that they can have these trysts, so they can have these extramarital affairs. But there's a really interesting thing he does in that first act is you see that's happening, and that he doesn't go home right away because his narration tells you he has this problem with his apartment and he can't get in there. And finally he's able to get in, and the guys kind of boss him around and like, hey, you used to have these little cheese crackers and, get some more of those. And, and he's like, yeah, fine. So finally he's at home and he's alone and he's having a TV dinner and, And then somebody calls him, one of the execs says, hey, get out of your apartment. I need your apartment. He's like, well, I just settled down. It's like, no, get out of your apartment. I need it. And so fine, so he lets this guy use his apartment, and he has to spend the night on a park bench, right? In Central Park all by himself. And, of course, the next day he has a cold, right? Right. And that cold is a reminder always that I think that the same thing happens in 12 Angry Men. The cold is often a reminder, or a sickness seems to be a reminder of that somebody's not quite right. And so the only reason he's sick is because he didn't have the guts to stand up to his bosses. And he's sort of prostituting himself. And you'll see that the clone character, the woman he's interested in, is doing the same thing.
I'm telling you, man, I'm running it in my head. This movie is so insane.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. And I'm not a guy who talks about lines very much in movies, right? Because I think sometimes they steal focus, and it makes people think something's better than it is because the dialogue is clever or whatever. But there are a couple of really amazing things in this movie, and one of them is that the woman, the clone character for Jack Lemmon's character, played by Shirley MacLaine.
Yeah, who killed it.
Yeah, she's great in it, Miss Kubelik. And she, she's having an affair with this guy, and the guy's like, he has to go home for my wife is waiting for me, and I got my kids and stuff, and he says he doesn't have time to pick up a gift, so he hands her money. Like, get yourself something nice, They have, I think, some good handbags at Bergdorf's or whatever. And she starts to take her, I think she has a coat on or something. She starts to take it off. And he's like, what are you doing? We have to go. And she goes, well, I thought as long as it was paid for. Right? So it tells you exactly how she thinks about herself. And exactly about...
And he's doing the same thing.
Right. Yeah. That's also when she says, I don't know where this line came from, if it was Izzy Diamond or Billy Wilder or Shirley MacLaine, where she says, she's crying and she says, a woman in love with a married man shouldn't wear mascara. This is the greatest. It's amazing.
No,
it's amazing.
The mirror thing, like.
Oh yeah.
The compact thing. His hat.
Yeah.
You sell your soul for a hat. You sell your soul for a key.
Yeah. It's amazing.
The key thing is nuts.
Yeah. You just have to watch for the key. Just watch for the key and how the key
things to watch for.
Yeah.
Clone characters. Can you explain what a clone character is?
A clone character is a way to measure your character. So a clone character is a character that's very much like your main character. Identical in some ways, but often has some difference. Sometimes can be pretty much the same. These characters are very much the same. But it's a way to so like the Three Little Pigs is my favorite example of clone characters, right? Where it's really the story of one pig, but you understand the failure or the success of the last pig by the failure of the first two pigs, right? They're clones.
Yeah.
If you tell the story without them, the story doesn't make any sense, right? You have to understand, again, it's context, right? It's not a pig built a house of bricks, ta-da, right? Right. It's there was a failure and another failure and then a success. That's the only way you know it was a success, right? So that's another thing I see a lot in modern things, that there's no measurement. Mm-hmm. Like, whoa, they won. It's like, well, they seem to always be winning. So right. I don't, whatever it is. Context, the clone characters give you context. So
right.
then that
David and Goliath.
Right. Yeah. This one's big, this one's small.
Yeah.
Right.
And they set it up too.
Yeah.
He's killed this many people and blah, blah, blah. And then this guy shows up and he's like, I'll kill him. And he's like, get out of here.
Yeah.
That's why it matters. Contrast, right?
Yeah. Contrast matters. So, but anyway, these characters are much closer in a lot of ways. But Shirley MacLaine's character gets to sort of say some things, I think, about herself that C.C. Baxter doesn't say about himself. C.C. Baxter would never think of himself as prostituting himself. Mm-hmm. But I think that his relationship with Shirley MacLaine makes that clear to him that that's what he's doing.
Yep.
Otherwise, I don't think he would know.
Yeah, because he can see it in her.
Right.
And which means, because it's a clone, he can now see it himself, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah, that movie is insane.
It is insane, and it's one of the few characters that are, or few films that have two characters of change. She changes and he changes. And they both, by the end of the piece, respect themselves.
God, man, the last scene of that movie? Yeah. Come on.
Yeah,
Get out of here.
It's very, very good. It's a very good movie.
Yeah, I don't know how you do it better than that.
I don't either. I mean, the guy made a lot of masterpieces.
How crazy is that? Making one of those movies, you could take your boots off or whatever they say and just hang them up and be like, well, that does it for me. I made Sunset Boulevard.
Yeah.
See you guys around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But not
no,
really
it just kept going.
Yeah. Which is...
God, The Apartment, man. There's something about that movie. There's so many of those things. Mm-hmm. Like if you took one of those things, the key thing, or you'll see when you see the film, the key thing or the mirror thing or that if you... when she takes off her crown and she leaves it on the seat. Mm-hmm. You remember that?
When she takes off... Oh, yeah.
It's New Year's.
Yes.
And he has on a crown and she has on, right, like a tiara or whatever.
Thing, yeah.
And she doesn't put it on. They just look over and it's sitting on her chair. She gives it up. Mm-hmm. And you're just like, God. When that first time I saw it, I was like, oh my God, he's in a different stratosphere.
Yeah.
It's the stuff that when you see, you go like, well, yeah. Mm-hmm. No, that was obviously like, try to write that. Yeah. Sit down and write it. Try to do that. Yeah. Do that right there.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nuts. Mm-hmm. The cork, you'll see when you see it, like, get out of here. And the last things they say to each other, that's one of the most beautiful scenes.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's just, again, I'm always accused of not liking things. You don't like anything. But when you learn this stuff, what happens is it recalibrates what you think of as
what's good. Yeah.
And you can't suffer something that isn't working as easily. I've seen it with students.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you've ruined movies for me, right? They say it to me all the time.
Yeah.
But then the things that you like and you understand why they're working for you, it's amazing how much more you appreciate those things.
Here's an experiment. Go home, actually watch The Apartment. Like, no bullshit. If you want to get good at this stuff, watch it. Take notes. Pay attention. At the end of that film, go to the cinema. Whenever you see this, 5 years from now, 10, whenever you see this, whatever the big movie is, sit down and watch it. And if you walk out and go that movie's better, right? Mm-hmm. I'd knock me over with a feather.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
Contrast helps us see. Watch The Apartment. Go watch whatever.
I'll go further than that. You can do that, but I think I mentioned it on the show before. But I had a friend I was staying with for a while, and he said, "Hey, you can stay here if you want to, but you have to teach me story structure while you're staying here." So every night we'd watch a movie, and I'd break down the structure, and we'd break it down, and he learned a lot about story structure. Then he said, "I have a movie that I like that I think you'd really like," and so we started to watch the movie, and I don't know, 15 minutes into 15 minutes or so into the movie, maybe 20 minutes, he's like, "Oh, this movie's not very good." Now, I didn't say anything, right? Uh-huh. I tried to be neutral and cool and try to, watch his movie. But what had happened was he had watched enough well-structured things to see differently. Mm-hmm. Because, again, he's like, oh, I see. This works, and this is why this works. This doesn't do any of those things. This is why it's boring right here. Or they have stopped the movie for some jokes or whatever. Right. But it was the steady diet of well-structured things that allowed him to see differently. Yeah. And so I tell people to do this, but they won't do it. So I'll go watch, this show or whatever, or watch watch every episode of this, or watch these movies, and then go back to, like you said, now watch something modern, or watch this or watch that, and you'll see the difference. What I find is people are not that committed. So what they'll do is they'll go, well, I watched this, but then I watched
the first half of whatever,
and then I watched some other things, and then I went back to it, or I got to get back to the Twilight Zone, but I'm watching all these other. It's like, that's not going to do. Then don't do it. Yeah. Either do it or don't do it. I don't care if you don't do it, but don't pretend like you want to learn and then don't do the work. Yeah. Do the work. Mm-hmm. It's not hard to sit down and watch The Twilight Zone. Like, yeah.
But I talked about this in the thing we went to last week, you know, I have that quote where it says the natural world makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Cats love fish but hate water. That's how it works. Everybody wants to learn how to do this stuff. They just don't want to learn how to do this stuff.
Yeah.
No, I want to be, you know, I want to be a better filmmaker. It's like, great. What'd you think of The Apartment? Well, you know, I didn't watch it yet. Or you're like, okay, well, what do you want to talk about? Well, I want to talk about the new thing that I saw that I did make time for.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay.
Yeah.
Right? It's like,
well, if you want to be, I've said it before, I'm sure, but architects don't dismiss old architecture. Like, even if they're doing modern architecture, like, no, they'll go to the churches in Europe and look at them.
Yeah.
Right? They'll go see how things were built. They'll marvel at those things.
Yeah.
Right?
You go study the Hagia Sophia or whatever.
Whatever it is.
You don't go like, well, it's old. I'm not going to check that out.
Right. But for whatever reason, it's like, it's just, you know, chronological sort of snobbery.
Yeah. That's right.
That's all that it's like, oh, but we're now and they were then. It's like, what?
Watch The Apartment.
Yeah.
Just watch it.
Yeah.
And have an open mind to it.
Yeah.
Right? And you might have to struggle with some language stuff or whatever. It's like, well, get over that. Like,
yeah.
It doesn't happen in Shakespeare. You'd get over if it was Shakespeare.
Right.
Just try it and see what happens and actually pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
And once you start to see the principles played out and how they actually, the craftsmanship of that film, you go, wow, who is this Billy Wilder guy? And then you're going to figure out, you're going to watch his films, and then you're going to go like, well, who did he like?
Mm-hmm.
Like Ernst Lubitsch, and like start watching his stuff, and you're like, oh my God. And it'll just be like one of those veins of gold, and you can keep mining it.
Yeah.
Once you put, you know, it's whatever, garbage in, garbage out type of a thing. Let's talk about another film that I know is close to your heart, Bobby Fischer.
Searching for Bobby Fischer, yeah.
Why Bobby Fischer? Why do you love this movie so much?
That's another level of I don't know. That movie's so special, and I don't think people understand how special that movie is. They do when I show it in class or show pieces of it. They get it. I think it's effortless. It doesn't look like anybody's doing anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And to write like that.
First of all, who wrote it?
Steven Zalian, who wrote.
Has he ever done anything else?
Well, he wrote Schindler's List that same year.
Sure.
Right.
Both of them, 1 year. Right.
Yeah. But he directed Bobby Fischer. It's beautifully shot. It's just what's amazing about it is its point is hidden in plain sight. The point of the movie is sort of just hidden. So you think it's about this chess genius kid, and it is, but it's about how this kid having a good heart is the most important thing. It's more important than chess.
How do they see that? What's the best thing to look for to see that?
Well, the kid has made friends with a guy who plays chess in the park, speed chess in the park. And he's sort of presented as if he's not, you know, not this character, but those guys are sort of presented as sort of shady, like maybe they play for drug money, chess for drug money, whatever. But that's mentioned, but you never see that happening, so I don't know. But at one point, the kid is being put to bed and by his mother, and he says, where does, I forget the character's name, but it's Lawrence Fishburne. So he says, where does Lawrence Fishburne live? And he says, she says, I don't know. He says, does he live in the park? I don't know. It's like, well, maybe he could sleep in my top bunk and I could sleep. Like, you know, he's like,
hey, just come live with us.
And the mother is great because she doesn't say no. She says, I don't know where he lives. And then he says all these things. And she says, well, you have a good heart. And that's the most important thing.
Man, I know. I'm trying to think about that scene.
It's amazing. That's her answer. Oh, you have a good heart.
It's like the best mom. It's crazy.
Right. And so then there's a point at which the dad wants to enter the kid. His name is Josh. Bobby Fischer is who they think Josh will be the next Bobby Fischer, who was a kid chess genius. So anyway, so the dad wants Josh to be in these competitions, and his teacher, played amazingly well by Ben Kingsley, says those tournaments are all just about winning and losing. And the dad's like, well, yeah, what else is there, essentially, right? And you'll see how that plays out. And the other amazing thing is you'll see one of the best uses of a charged object I've seen in a long time. And you'll see this piece of paper. It's just a piece of paper. Charged objects are, objects that are charged with emotion. I've talked about it before in case they haven't seen it.
In case no one's listening.
Yeah, in case nobody's ever watched our show.
Yeah.
Or this is your first one. A charged object is an object that is imbued with emotion for some reason, right? So in Seabiscuit, a character's son is killed, and there's a game that he used to like to play all the time where one of those games where it's got a little metal ball in it, you try to get into different holes, one of those kind of games. And so the character carries that game around for the rest of the movie. And when he's thinking about stuff or whatever, he brings that game. Yeah.
And there's some stuff in Seabiscuit.
Yeah, and it's charged, right? So it means something. So every time he brings it out, it's imbued with this emotion, and the audience responds. It could be anything. In fact, I think that the least amount of value something would have in real life, the more you can charge it, right? Because if it's a diamond ring, right?
Yeah.
Right? You better be charged with something pretty special because it's already a diamond ring.
It's already special.
If it's an Academy Award.
Yeah. But if it's a coffee cup,
right.
That's interesting.
Right. Because all it has is sentimental value or emotional value, right? If it's a rock, right?
Yeah.
So this is a piece of paper, and this piece of paper goes from being valuable to worthless to priceless.
It's so crazy. It's so crazy.
Yeah. When you watch it, you'll see. It's amazing what happens. And it all is tied around this idea of the kid learning that having a heart is the most important thing and not winning and losing. He wins by learning that. It's so
good.
It's so good. Yeah, it's unbelievably well written. It's one of the most underrated movies I can think of.
There's a scene that tell them about the scene that they need to watch for.
Okay.
And how it's one of those things, because I think it's so well done that if you're not watching for it, like in class, you show it. So people go, oh, this is important. They pay attention. Mm-hmm. But if you're just watching, you might miss how masterful this thing is done.
Right.
You want to talk about that scene?
Yeah. Well, this is when I talk about visual storytelling in class. And I show clips from different movies and how well they move the story along visually. Sometimes people think it's a different job, visual storytelling and story. It's like, no, it's the same job.
Yeah.
And, excuse me, so there's a scene where, really it's a sequence. So the father finds out that the kid can play chess. And he's like, he can't play chess. Josh doesn't know how to play chess. And so he wants to test it because the mom has seen him play, but the dad hasn't seen him play. And they don't know how he knows how to play chess. But he does. And so, but the dad's like, I don't know. So he pretends that he just wants to play chess with his son. Like, let's just play chess. And there's 2 chess games. So you see one. It gives you context, right? It gives you something to. So they play 2 games essentially. So the first game, the kid lets his dad win, right? And you get a sense of that the kid, but the dad doesn't. Dad
thinks he won.
Yeah,
he's like, what are you talking about?
And he's talking to his wife because the kid wants to go to a car dealership and get some brochures. That's what he wants to do. That's all the kid wants to do. And the dad's like, no, let's play chess. Just for fun. And so he tells the kid once he wins that game, like, okay, get your coat and we'll go to the dealership. And he says the dad says to his wife, he says, I know I should have let him win. I gave him every opportunity. And she says, he wasn't trying to win. It's like, what are you trying to say?
Don't you get it?
Don't you get it? Mm-hmm. He doesn't want to beat his daddy, right? This goes back to his good heart, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't want to beat his daddy, right? And so then he's like, no, okay. Now this gets the dad going. It's like, that's his pride. That's his ego, right? Like, no,
because dad wants to win.
Yeah. So he says to Josh, we're going to play again. And he goes, well, we'll just play one more game, just for fun. We'll play one more game. And the mom says, it's okay to beat him, Josh. You won't hurt his feelings. Right.
Yeah.
And then you see a different kid. You see a different aspect of this kid. So when they play the first game, the kid gets phone books to make himself high enough to play.
No, dad does that, right?
No, the kid
to sit on the phone books?
I think the kid gets them. The kid puts this, and you see his feet, and his feet they're off the ground and dangling, and he's just a little kid, and he almost makes himself small.
Yeah.
And plays chess.
Laces are untied.
Yeah, all that stuff.
So smart, man.
And then when he plays the second game, the first thing he does is throw the phone books down, and his feet are on the ground. Right. He's not playing a little boy. He's not a little boy when he plays this game. Right? So that's one of the first things that happens. Then the sequence goes on where they start to play, and then you cut to later, and the kid is playing with his sister like the mousetrap game. They're like playing mousetrap. And then his dad's like, Josh, it's your turn. And Josh runs downstairs and without looking at the board, moves pieces and goes back and leaves. And the dad is sitting there struggling, and the kid keeps not paying attention, but able to know the board and able to move pieces without thinking about it. And you see this over and over again in this sequence. There's one point where he's on the phone with a friend of his, and his dad says, Josh, it's your turn. And Josh says, don't hang up, to his friend, and he puts the phone down, and he runs. This is really nicely done because he's in a kitchen, and he runs through a swinging door. And the chess game is happening on the other side of the swinging door. So you see the kid go through the door is swinging. You see him move a piece, right? And then run back before the door stops swinging. And it's like, okay, now I'm back, right? So that's another thing. And then you see the kid in a tub. Uh-huh. And he's like throwing a ball and taking a bath. And oh, by the way, it's getting later and later as the dad. So it's like the sun is going down and the dad is sitting there struggling. And this kid is not even looking at the board. And he says, Josh, it's your move. And he says, did you move my horse? The dad's like, it's called the knight. Yeah. Yeah. Did you move, or did you move that pawn? Whatever he says. And he goes, I moved a pawn. And the kid's like, yeah, that one. Yeah. And he's like, well, can we go to the dealership now? And the kid is in another room.
Yeah.
Can we go to the dealership now? And the dad says, well, the game's not over yet, Josh. And he says, yes, it is. And the dad looks at the board and realizes, oh, it is. It's so well done. It's so well, people who've seen me show it in class, I cry almost every time I show it. Not because of the content, but because of how well it's done.
Yeah.
It's like seeing a beautiful painting or something to me.
Yeah.
It's just so beautifully put together.
It's unbelievable.
And it's hard to do. And it's such a great way to show how good this kid is at what he's doing and how effortless it is.
No fat, man. Everything is building and building and building to that. Yes, it is.
It's one of the most beautiful things. Yeah, I think I might faint if I met Steve's alien. I think I might faint.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it is.
So watch for that. Mm-hmm. Watch this film. Listen to Mom. Yeah. Mom's kind of the guiding. Right?
Mom's always the person who has the heart. She's the guard of the heart. There.
Yep.
Yeah.
And same type of thing. Go watch that movie, and then run down to your local.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because man, there's some stuff that movie is unbelievable. Imagine doing that and Chandler's in the same year.
Yeah.
How?
I don't know how. I don't know. They came out the same year. I don't know if he wrote them the same year.
But God. Yeah. Anyhow.
Yeah.
So see it if you haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Same thing. What about Nemo?
Well, Nemo's.
That's your favorite Pixar film.
My
right?
favorite Pixar movie. Yeah. Other people will pick other movies, but for me.
Why Nemo for you? What is it about Nemo?
Nemo doesn't have any fat on it. Nothing happens in Nemo that shouldn't happen. Nothing happens just because it's funny or because it's clever or there's no fat on that movie, and it's there's just something very magical and special about it. I think because of that, because there's no fat on it. Yeah, it's just a beautiful, beautiful movie.
What should you watch for in Nemo?
Well, it has an amazing first act, a beautiful first act. First, it has a really nice outer boundaries. People.
I'm sorry, can you explain what that is?
The outer boundaries is you're going to ask people to believe certain things in your movie or your story. And so you want to get out the most extreme thing that can happen in your piece as quickly as you can, so that the audience goes, oh, it can go this far. So it's Indiana Jones running from a boulder, and all of that stuff happens at the beginning of Raiders of the Lost Ark. So then you can go to the classroom and go, at some point we're going to get back to, this kind of reality. If you go the other way, people don't believe it, right? So if you go from guy teaching class to guy being chased by a boulder,
professor,
you don't buy it. So you want to go extreme first, right? So murder mystery people will say, oh, you got to start with the murder. You want to go extreme first. So Nemo does that, right? It starts with establishing Marlin and his wife, Coral, and even the name of the kid, because he's like, let's call them Nemo. We can't call them all Nemo or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but and one of the things he says is he wonders if they won't like him, Marlin. What if they don't like me? Right? And I don't remember how many eggs there are, but his wife is like, well, there's this many of them. One of them's bound to like you. Right? Right. And so Coral then is killed by the Barracuda, and
wait, what? People who haven't seen Nemo yet are just furious.
So she's killed, and then there's only one egg left, right? So Marlin takes care of that egg, and then he calls it Nemo, right? And so now that really helps. This is still part of the first act. It's almost like a prologue, but it's still all part of the first act. This is all outer boundaries. So then you see Marlin being very cautious, right, with Nemo, right? He doesn't want so he's overprotective. We understand why he's overprotective because of this nice outer boundaries, which they didn't have in an early version of the movie when they did it. If I had been there, I would have been like, you have to have this. But
why did that have to be added?
What they found was that people, when they saw the movie there at Pixar internal screenings, they didn't like Marlin because they didn't understand why he was so
his pain and
they didn't understand why aren't you letting your son do this, and why are you they didn't like him, and they revealed it throughout the movie, little pieces of what happened, but that wasn't really helpful.
It was too late.
Yeah, it was too late. That happens a lot now. I've noticed people don't have a first act anymore, and so what they do instead of have a first act is have a flashback. And so it's like, oh, this flashback or this thing you're talking about that happened, that's your first act. But they think they want to get to the meat of things, and they don't understand that the context is what gives it any emotional power. So it's like, well, tell me that these two people are in love before you break them up. Show me how they're in love before you break them up. Now we want to start with the breakup and then go, yeah, boy, she was the love of my life halfway through the movie. It's like, well, now I don't care.
Right.
Right? It happens all the time now. All the time. Almost everything I see, I'm like, why didn't they?
The movie I was talking about earlier did that. Mm-hmm. The one I was talking about that was just telling you exactly what.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
No subtext. So that made you, now you understand him and understand why he's so protective.
Yeah.
Of Nemo. What else to look for in Nemo as you're taking notes?
Really good use of clone characters. A very good use of clone characters. So you have Marlin, who is scared of the open sea, scared of the ocean, doesn't want to go out there. It's dangerous out there. But he has to find his son. So he has to go to the place he doesn't want to be in, which is always great. If you can take a character and put them in the last place they want to be, that's
good.
That's gold. So He doesn't want to be out in the ocean. He doesn't want to be there.
And he doesn't like snakes.
And he doesn't like anything.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. No, I said Indy doesn't like snakes.
Indy doesn't like
yeah,
snakes. Right. Indy doesn't like snakes. Where does he have to go? Right.
Yep.
That you always have to. So Marlin meets Dory. Now, here's what's interesting about Dory as a character. Dory has no memory, right? She has this short-term memory, but she's always forgetting things. So here's what's great. Marlin is a character who's plagued by memory. Always worried, always upset. Dory has no memory. Always happy, always joyful, right? So she's more like what this guy needs to be. Mm-hmm. That's a really nice use of clone characters, right? So you have this contrast. Dory is funny and not worried about things, and that is a joyful thing to watch next to Marlin, who is worried all the time and concerned all the time.
Contrast.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Right? So here you have a guy plagued by memory, and then a character, she has no memory at all, really. Really great. So that's one use of clone characters. One of the other uses of clone characters is that you have this overprotective father in Marlin, and then you have the turtle, Crush, right? Who allows his son to do the dangerous thing or the scary thing, so that the kid can learn their limits and know what they can or can't do. So it's a great clone character. But one of the other great clone characters is when Nemo is captured and he's in a tank, there's a sort of father character in that tank, right? That character, Gil, is a great clone for both the kind of father that Marlin could be, but he's also a great clone for Nemo, because Nemo has a fin that is smaller than his other fin. And so Gil has a fin that has been damaged, right? And he's still able to do things, and he's still a tough guy. And it's amazingly, everything fits together. It's just this perfect clock that all the gears work. So I would watch for if you watch for the clone characters, that's almost enough. But also just watch for what it is that Marlin needs to learn, and how well he learns it. Mm-hmm. And how he's a different person in the end, and why that happened. Why, if you wouldn't ask, why is this character in this story? That's not a question you would ask about that movie.
Either one of them.
Yeah. Or any character.
Yeah, any of them. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, it's crazy. And you can see why it did so well and why it sticks with people, mm-hmm. right? They knew what it was about.
One time I was carrying the DVD around for something, and every time somebody saw the cover, they go, "That's a great movie." That's a great movie. They had to stop and tell me, "That's a great movie."
Let's talk about Aliens, right? You want to set up. It's funny because I think a lot of people think Aliens might be the first one, right? I've run into that before, where people are like, "Wait, Aliens?" It's like, yeah, Aliens is the second one. You want to set up Aliens?
Yeah, Aliens. So there was Alien, right?
Uh-huh.
And Alien made a lot of money and people. There are people who will say that it's better than Aliens. I'm not one of those people,
uh-huh.
but I think it's fine. I just, I'm not one of those people. It's moodier, if that's the way if you're judging based on moody, and then the performances are amazing, I think, in that movie, and it's photographed well, has everything going for it.
Yeah,
but it's essentially only a monster movie. People get picked off one by one. Somebody survives. It's just a well-done monster movie.
Also, you said Ripley was originally...
the character of Ripley is a woman in the piece, but was written as a man and then cast.
I didn't know that. That blew my mind. That's crazy.
Yeah. So Sigourney Weaver got cast, and then Ripley became a woman, which doesn't really mean much in that first movie, but it means a lot in the second movie.
Yeah.
And so in the second movie, there's an amazing thing. So Ripley escapes... and you don't need to know any of this, by the way.
Yeah, that's the funny thing about Aliens.
Aliens is perfect that way, that you don't need to know that there was another movie. Like, it just works all by itself.
Which we don't get that anymore. No. Now it's like, well, you have to see the other four in order to understand the new whatever.
Yeah.
No, you can just watch Aliens if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, yeah. I got to watch 10 movies to watch this one. It's not like that,
Yeah.
right? It's a thing that stands on its own. And it's, I think, better because of it. And so, anyway, so what happens is when Aliens starts, they find a ship floating in space, and Ripley's been in suspended animation after she escaped the alien. Anyway, you find all that stuff out, this thing. And she's been asleep, essentially, for 70-something years, 75 years or 70-something years, over 70 years, asleep. And so...
Must be nice, huh?
Yeah. So, her life has passed her by while she's been asleep. And, in fact, there's a really great thing where you see that she's having nightmares. She's in a hospital, and she's having nightmares. And she wakes up, and the nurse says, "Oh, do you need me to give you something to help you sleep?" And Ripley says, "No, I've slept enough already." Right? Right? Which matters.
Yeah.
Right? So she's having these nightmares about the alien, about the things that happened on the ship before. She's having these nightmares. And in the theatrical release, this doesn't exist. But if you watch it on DVD, you can see this. You can feel it. When I remember seeing this in the theater, you can feel this. But as it turns out, on the DVD, you can see that Ripley had a daughter that she promised she'd be home for her 7th birthday.
No way. That's on the DVD?
Yeah.
I've never seen that version.
Oh, you haven't?
No.
Oh, you should watch that.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Well, that changes everything.
I know.
I've only seen the theatrical.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, no. Yeah, that's... Oh, you got to watch that.
That would have made it way better. I mean, I thought it was awesome as it was.
It is awesome as it is. But there's... So, yeah. So, what happened was the movie was too long. It wouldn't be too long now because movies are creeped up in length. But at that moment in time, it was too long. And so, 1986, they were like, this is too long. So Cameron cut that out of the movie. But you find out that Ripley had a daughter, and she said she would be home for her daughter's 7th birthday. She finds out her daughter died essentially of old age, died of cancer. It's been 78 years or whatever. So that's, but I would say that you can feel this in the piece.
Man. Yeah, you can. That's crazy.
The residue is still there, right? So if you watch the theatrical version, the residue of that.
Yeah.
But it's you'll see it if you watch the DVD, and so she's lost her daughter. She's being plagued with these nightmares. So they ask her first of all. Oh, and she blew up. Ripley blew up the spaceship with the alien in it. Or she thought the alien was in it. And so she has to see the company she works for, and they're like, that was a lot of money you blew up. And she's like, yeah, there was a crazy alien on it. They're like, they don't believe it and whatever. And so it turns out the planet that they were on, where they found this alien, they have set up a colony there in the meantime. And she's like, oh, that's not a smart idea. Ripley's like, that's a bad idea. It's like, well, nobody's seen anything bad yet. So anyway... Turns out something bad does happen, and they've lost touch with the colony, and they want to figure out what's going on, and so they're going to send all these Marines, and they want Ripley to go, and she's like, I'm not going.
Yeah.
No, I'm not going. And so she doesn't want to go, and she has a nightmare. She's been having all these nightmares, and then she decides she wants to go because she wants to kill it. So what's interesting is that this whole piece is about her facing her fear and conquering her fear. The whole piece is
just like Jaws.
Just like Jaws. So she's completely afraid, right? She does not want to be anywhere around these aliens. It's interesting because the Marines, I remember the Marines, one friend of mine saw it, and he goes, those Marines were so stereotypical and so blustery and blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, that's what they had to be. They had to think.
Yeah, Bill
nothing,
Paxton, right?
Yeah, they had to think, well, Bill Paxton is not that guy.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah.
Yeah, but the other Marines are.
But he starts that way.
Yeah, he does. He does start that way. Yeah, he does.
He's the big talker.
Yeah, that's true. And they think that they can take it out, whatever it is. There's no problem. We're Marines.
We got bullets.
Yeah. And then they find out it's not as easy as they thought. And Ripley ends up sort of being the hero of the piece and saving them a lot. And
reluctant hero. You've talked about the reluctance before.
Yeah, because that's what makes a hero. Reluctance is what makes a hero. They've forgotten that. now everybody's gung-ho to do everything. But reluctance is what makes a hero, because if you're called on in life to do anything heroic, it's going to require some bravery. It's going to require you to do something that's uncomfortable. It's going to require something of you. And now the hero is somebody who, it's not a hard choice. It's never a hard choice. It's like, I'll go right into the fire and it's like, you know what I mean? And it's not as powerful. It's not as powerful because there's no example for you to follow.
Yeah.
Right? But you can follow the example of Jaws. You can be scared and go out and like, you know what? I'm going to protect my family. I'm going to protect my community, and I'm going to get this shark. It's my job.
Yeah.
It's my responsibility. I'm going to do it. As much as it scares me, I'm going to do it. And so that's why people identify with that character, and they can aspire to be that character. But you can't aspire to be somebody who's not scared of anything.
Yeah.
That's not even human.
Right.
Right? And so so Ripley doesn't want to go, but she's facing her fear. While on this, they find out this colony's been destroyed by these aliens, and they find a little girl who's survived. And so Ripley sort of takes on
About how old is that little girl?
About the same age as her daughter. Right?
That's weird. That's a really interesting coincidence.
Isn't it? And
God, I can't believe it was like that originally. That makes so much sense. It would have been even better.
Yeah. It's really, you should watch it with that. Yeah, it's amazing.
Dang.
Yeah, there's some good stuff.
I love that he thought of that. Of course he thought of that.
Of course he did. He was really
Guy's
good.
Dynamite, man.
Yeah, when he's on
Get out
fire.
of here.
When he's on fire.
Jeez.
Yeah. And Terminator 2.
Yeah, you can talk about Terminator 2.
Yeah. Same,
Whatever. Yeah.
But anyway, but Ripley sort of has a mother-daughter relationship, right?
Yeah.
With
Newt.
With Newt, the kid. What's interesting is that they find the queen alien, right? Who is the parent of all these other aliens.
She's the mother.
She's the mother of all the... So it's really these two mothers fighting for the survival of their young, which is amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And where does Newt go? Where does Ripley have to go to find Newt?
Oh, well, she has to go to the last place she wants to be. She has to go into the den. She has to go with,
If she was scared of one alien.
Yeah.
Now she's got to go face the queen. It's like you got to go see, Satan.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And so she has to go down, and it's not just an alien, it's the queen.
Right.
And the queen is protecting all of her children.
Right.
And Ripley cares about Newt, who's... Right? It's really smart.
It's very, very smart. Yeah.
It's more than a monster movie.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then, anyway, they end up defeating the alien and all of that. And then at the very end, Ripley is putting Newt to bed into the cryogenic, suspended animation thing, and she's putting Newt to bed, and she says, "Why do we have to go to sleep?" It's like, well, because it's a long journey, and it's just better if you sleep, kind of thing. And Newt says, "Can I dream?" And Ripley says, "Yeah, I think we both can," because that's what the whole movie's about.
And to think I used to hate the water.
Right. End of Jaws. Last line of Jaws. Right?
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, I have my sleep back.
Yeah.
I have my life back. I have my sleep back.
First act.
Yeah.
Pays off in the third act. So good.
Bow.
Yeah. But that's just it. And it works.
Of course it works. Of course. People don't like, it's all tied up in a little bow. Yeah. Yes, it is.
Yeah, you're like, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you walk out and you're like, man, that movie was awesome.
You should have seen it in 1986, you should have seen it. It's like, you should have seen it. It was an amazing thing to witness and to see in person. It was amazing. You should, yeah. I haven't seen, there's only been a couple of movies where I've seen people respond the way they did in that movie. One was when they re-released Rear Window and Aliens. I think those are the two.
Whoa, really?
Yeah. Yeah. People went nuts in The Empire Strikes Back, and they went nuts in Star Wars.
E.T. you said was insane.
E.T. was insane, but it wasn't that kind of,
The feeling.
The feeling it wasn't an action thing, so it was a little bit, but and Raiders had some of that, but I would say Aliens, it was crazy. People were just on the edge of their seats half the time, and screaming the other half of the time, and laughing half the time.
Yeah.
Like, it was, all the emotional buttons got hit.
But man, taking that piece of Ripley, now she's a mom, and now she has a daughter, and she's going up against a queen who's also protecting her. You're just like, man alive.
Yeah.
You don't stumble onto that. That's right.
That's craft.
Yeah,
that doesn't happen that does not happen by accident. That's what it means to not have any fat. That's what it means to have everything contribute to the piece, to the theme of your piece. Like, all of these pieces will do that. Everything we've talked about does that very well. It's the glue that holds everything together. It's like, oh no, this links to this, links to this, links to this. This happens because of that. It's not, I have a great scene, I have another great scene. And what about a scene like this? And what about a line like that? And what about a character like this? That doesn't work.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. These things have nothing to do with each other. But when it all comes out of what you're trying to say, and there's no fat on it, it's amazing what happens. It's magical what happens.
Yeah. Here's how I want to end, and you didn't know I was going to do this, but by the time this comes out, something significant will have happened for you, right?
Oh, that is true.
That is true.
Yeah.
Now, you listen to the show and you hear Brian talk about it, like, you should see him do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what's happening, honestly, I think by the time this comes out, it will already be out.
Yeah. So
want to tell us about it?
Yeah, my graphic novel, Old Souls, will be out. And so Old Souls, I try to incorporate all these things that I talk about. Old Souls was actually written originally as a screenplay and won Austin in 2006.
Okay, so now think about that for a second. When people talk about stamina,
yeah,
right, how long it takes. I took some folks to we went and saw Book of Mormon, and I was talking about, like, keep in mind it took 7 years.
Yeah,
7 years to write this, and because sometimes people go like, I'm going to sit down and crank something out.
Yeah.
So you wrote the original script,
mm-hmm.
and it won Austin in 2006.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to write that?
To write this,
the original script that won Austin.
I can't remember anymore. It didn't take that long. It doesn't take me that long to write something. It takes me a long time to figure out what I'm going to write.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I'm doing all of that kind of planning. Well, what's the purpose of this story? And you know what I mean? What characters do I need to help me create this story and make it work and adhere to the theme or the armature? So that takes a while. It has some reincarnation plays a big part in the story. So I did a lot of research on reincarnation, so that I wasn't inventing anything.
Yeah.
So that, and people have said this when it was a screenplay, people thought it had a real authenticity. They could tell that I did my research.
Yeah.
I appreciated that people could feel that.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, so I can't tell you how long it took. I can't remember.
But then obviously the script was great. It won, which the trophy's insane. You brought it into work that one time. And then you turned it into this new book.
Right.
Also.
Yeah, I was asked if I had anything by this First Second, who's the publisher, and they asked if I had anything. They liked Invisible Ink and wanted me to do some books with them, so I'm doing 3 books with them. But the first one is Old Souls. And so they read the script and liked the script, and Les McLean, who drew the book, drew right off the screenplay. So I had to write this book, but I almost did no writing by that time. But it was a long time.
Well,
and it's been 3 years. It's been 3 years in the making of the graphic novel, essentially.
Gosh, man.
So finally it's come.
It's awesome, though. Like,
thanks.
It's cool. Like, I've gotten to hold it. And so by this time, you can actually check this out. And you can look for all the stuff you've learned over the course of this, really, our kind of first season of the show. You can see it all in that book, which is really cool.
Yeah, hopefully I did a good job on the book. I think I did.
Yeah.
I'm proud of it. I hope people like it.
Awesome. So, obviously, title?
Old Souls.
Old Souls. Who put it out?
First Second.
First Second, but I mean, I ordered mine on Amazon. So
right. You can get it
anywhere.
You can get it anywhere because First Second is an imprint of Macmillan, and they're a pretty big publisher, so you can get it anywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Cool. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah. Thanks.
Next time on You Are a Storyteller.
I think you have to be happy with your work, whether you win these awards or not.
Yeah.
If you're not defining success for yourself, then it matters too much whether you win it or lose it. If you have to define it, it has to be something internal. It can't be anything external.
Thanks for watching You Are a Storyteller. If you have any questions, or if there's a storytelling topic you want to cover, leave a comment below or email us at hello@beliefagency.com.